Kia ora tātou, te whare e tunei, tēnā koe, te papai e waho, tēnā koe, e nā mana, e nā reo, ki te whānau e hui me, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Sam Trubridge, toku ingoa. I'm Sam Trubridge, I'm the director of the Performance Arcade, and welcome to this, our first live article event for 2019. A big thank you to Circa Theatre for hosting us tonight and their support with all our technical stuff here as well. Circa has a show at the moment called Rats in the Dark, which is running until 16th of February, and industry audiences are eligible for $25 tickets, so please come along to that and support Circa, who are partnering with us in several ways on the Performance Arcade this year and the Pink Line. And more information is out at the box office. Thank you also to Aaron Mitchell for live streaming this talk. It's not just a live stream which has been watched by people around New Zealand and the world, but also a document of this talk and works and conversations around the Performance Arcade. So thank you. And if any of you guys want to kind of share any of this information online, our hashtag is arcade_2019 or hashtag PA209. Our guests today are three really exceptional makers of movement, and they've joined us today for a panel which is called Dancing Lines. The format is that we'll start by some discussion of the individual works and the artists that we have here today, and then move through to some questions that I have for each of them before inviting you guys to ask any questions that you have. It should only take about an hour, and I really look forward to kind of the discussion around the individual works and what they're contributing to the Performance Arcade in this year's programme. This year the arcade is characterised by a pink line, Whai mai te rarangi mawharo, a 3 kilometre long sign that extends from the railway station all the way to Oriental Bay, and this builds on our vision for Wellington as a city of live art, and creates a kind of pathway that connects audiences of a diverse range of experiences in performance, culinary arts, dance, music, and other things. So a line has a variety of uses concerned with territory and discipline. It marks boundaries between property, nations and states, but it also connects distant locations and people, and can be used to separate people in locations as well. So lines on roads and sport fields and in airports control movement, and today the subject of the talk is about movement in relationship to the line. So I'm very excited to be welcoming these three artists who are working in three very different spaces along the line, and I'll introduce each of them and let them introduce the works they're doing in turn, so you get to sort of know what they're doing before we sort of talk more generally around the works and these concepts. So first I'd like to, very honoured to be able to introduce Lucy Marinkovich, who has worked with Footnote New Zealand Dance as a choreographer and a dancer, as well as other companies like New Zealand Dance Company and Takirua. She's presented the Performance Arcade twice now. This is her third time, and last year scooped many of the in 2017 scooped many of the New Zealand Theatre Awards with the production of Lobsters in this very space with Borderline Arts Ensemble, a company that she's founded with many of her regular collaborators. She's currently a dance educator with Royal New Zealand Ballet, and only 6 weeks ago was awarded the prestigious Friedlander Award by the Arts Foundation of New Zealand to live and work in New York for a year. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And first I'd like to hear about the work that you're making for the Performance Arcade.
Cool. So, kia ora, as Sam just said, my name is Lucy Marinkovich. I work in Wellington as a choreographer. Largely, the dancing shows aren't quite up, but is sort of halfway on the shelf. So this year for the arcade, I'm making a work called Thursday, and Thursday will be performed on Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, confusingly. Sorry for everybody. And this work is inspired by the 1946 beautiful black and white film classic by David Lean called Brief Encounter. And I saw the work for the first time last year, and I just thought it was really charming, and it surpassed my previous favourite film, which was Casablanca, which is another black and white kind of romantic film. And I don't know, but honestly, it's a masterpiece. It's so beautiful. The sense of composition in it is just really stunning, and it has a really lovely aesthetic, but the way they tell the story is really charming. But yeah, I think there's something really beautiful and commonplace about the narrative that they tell in this, which is about two people, a man and a woman, both from separate married couples, who meet at a train station every Thursday, and they just really simply fall in love with one another, and they don't have a kind of physical relationship because of the time and the sense of propriety in England, like post-war England. It was really decidedly non-physical, but it happened nonetheless, and I just found it really quite striking and kind of heartbreaking the way they tell the story. So the work I'm making, every Thursday they meet at the railway station, so the duet I'm making is going to be at Wellington Railway Station. It'll happen twice a day over those 2 days, and it was really an opportunity for me as a choreographer to look at the mode of duet, which I haven't really done in my previous work so much. The duets I've done have almost been focused on the lack of contact to tell a story, and so yeah, I kind of had a couple of tasks for myself as a choreographer to like upskill. So looking at contact and touch with duet and lifting is kind of like my ulterior motive. Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah. And that's at one end of our pink line, at the very north end at the railway station. And further along the line, in two locations with two different works, we have another artist who's making some really exciting pieces for the Performance Arcade. One at the New Zealand Portrait Gallery and another at our new performance hub in the arcade, which we've called the Body Box. And so I'm really excited to be introducing Ufitia Sagapolutele, who has flown down from Auckland today to be with us and to share her work. She's wearing registration arcade pink.
It was planned. No.
Which is perfect. And so Tia's been part of Paris Goebbels' dance crew, the Royal Family, which has won gold medals and travelled around the world of workshops and dance pieces internationally. With Identity Dance Crew, she has also had multiple medal placements at the World Hip Hop Dance Championships. She's a dancer and a choreographer who works between hip hop dance, Siva Samoa, and contemporary dance. And so she's completed a master's in dance studies at Auckland University and is a project coordinator for Dance Aotearoa in New Zealand. And so this is Tia's first presentation in the Performance Arcade, and one of her works has been presented before in Auckland. Would you like to tell us about those two pieces?
Yeah. So malo lava everyone. My name is Ufitia Sagapolutele. I'm just really excited to be here, and so I'm presenting two works. One is called Ave, which is about 6 Samoan women who explore ideologies around colonisation, cultural identity, and the challenges they face as New Zealand-born Samoan women. So that's really exciting. I created this work 2 years ago, which was actually my first dance work leaving the hip-hop scene. And so it was really great to be with these women who I studied with at the University of Auckland, because we were all on a similar pathway of wondering who we are and what we should do moving forward as artists. So that's the first piece. And the second piece, I don't know how to explain it, because the title is in like Tatao symbol, so it's like the greater.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and we're like, it's like the math symbol for greater than less than, so like the alligator mouth opens.
Yeah, it's like that one, and then like that, and then there's like a line in the middle, and then that way. So that's just we drew inspiration from Tatao for that title, and basically that work is 3 oceanic women who draw inspiration from 3 deity. So we look at, so my dancers, one is Māori, one is Samoan, and the other one is Tongan. So we look at 3 deity from their cultures. Sorry. So one is Hine Nui Te Po, Nawhanua for Samoa, and Hikuleo for Tonga. So basically we draw inspiration from them, and just for those three was really just discovering who they are and just realizing that they're very strong, powerful Oceanic women. So that was really great to be a part of that. So those are the two works I'll be presenting. So, yeah.
Thank you. And at the very other end of the line, in Oriental Bay, Jeremy is a lead artist on a work which we're really excited to be presenting. And so Jeremy is not a dancer, he's a videographer, who is well known in New Zealand for his work with dance and with various dance artists, making sort of dynamic, moving documents of works that they've made, that preserve those works to be watched again and again, as video and film and dance film. So Jeremy has worked regularly with Footnote New Zealand Dance, New Zealand Dance Company, and now works at the Royal New Zealand Ballet. He has shown work at the San Francisco Dance Film Festival, and his work as a filmmaker really moves and dances with his collaborators. So we're really excited to be partnering with our principal partners, Trust Power, to present a new work by Jeremy Brick in the Performance Arcade this year, in collaboration with dancers from the Royal New Zealand Ballet. So I'll let Jeremy say a little bit more about this work.
Okay, so this work is a projection, and it's going to be projected onto the Oriental Bay fountain, in the similar way that some people may have seen Lux Festival, where there are water projections on the lagoon. So for this one, Sam actually invited me to take part, and it was a bit of a decision about what to do, and I sort of thought, well, what would work from the ballet world that would also work on water? So the obvious choice was swans. And then I'm in the fortunate position where I actually have working relationships with all the dancers of the Royal New Zealand Ballet on a daily basis, and was able to ask Abigail Boyle if she would do the Dying Swan. I knew she was actually preparing the Dying Swan for a workshop anyway, so I just asked her if she wouldn't mind if I filmed that and place that on the fountain, so then people walking past will see not so much the fountain and not so much a film, but as Sam said, just a dancer on the harbour as a swan. And then we also decided, because I've been working really closely with Sarah Garbowski as well, and she happens to be, well, that week I was really deciding what I wanted to do. She was working closely with Czech choreographer Mario Radichovsky, who has a work called Black Swan, White Swan, which is a modern swan lake, which is having the New Zealand premiere in May. So I asked Mario if he didn't mind if Sarah used some of the choreography from that. So you have a Netherlands dance theatre type swan lake mixed with a really, I guess it was a 1905 Anna Pavlova Dying Swan. I've done a bit of research. So basically it was 1905.
Right.
So that probably means it was one of the first works shown in New Zealand. Like, if Pavlova toured here, there was no National Ballet Company at the time.
Yes, there's 1937 and
Yeah.
Rose used to ride. I'm not
Right.
Pavlova did it or not. Maybe
Pavlova came in 1936, and
Right.
actually 26, I'm a decade out, but the first work she showed was like unbelievably modern. It wasn't her famous swan at all. It was, she actually appeared behind a screen in silhouette.
Yeah.
So very kind of loose cunning, you know, like, yeah.
So like the way I like to see it is we've got one of the first works that was shown in New Zealand and one of the latest works, the iterations of a ballet swan, both being shown on the harbour, which will just sort of appear as ethereal kind of dances as people watch. Yeah, that's the idea.
And you guys are probably among the first to hear about this work, because it's been quite a closely guarded secret for the last few months as we test the technology and sort of get everything lined up for it. And it's now starting to leak into social media. So do watch this space as we start to make announcements about it. And yeah, we're really excited about each of these works that have been described tonight, because they bring so much to our program, and looking forward to sort of talking about them more and hearing what your questions are to these artists as well. I think one of my first questions to the artists is why this work and why the Performance Arcade for it?
Back to me.
Yeah.
So why this work? A couple of reasons. So I actually finished up with my position with the ballet company as their dance educator last year, but it was really interesting and very fascinating for me to be back in the ballet world. So I trained in ballet and contemporary concurrently when I was a teenager, and then my university training was basically going to the New Zealand School of Dance, where I was a contemporary student, and we did ballet every day for technique, but basically from that point my life is really focused on kind of contemporary dance and contemporary art practices. And so it was really confronting in various ways to be back in a ballet environment last year. And something that I really loved about it was the element of like whimsy, like the big emotional sweeping music and the costumes, and you know, like none of the kind of like utilitarian, oh let's just wear our own clothes kind of costumes. So the sense of like production I really loved, but also like people doing, like dancers doing things in a really earnest way. Like I feel like contemporary dancers and contemporary art practices, like we're often critical as a immediate reaction, and we kind of try and fit things into other kind of paradigms, and we get, I don't know, I think things can be over intellectualized, or we naturally go to that as a way to unpack kind of concepts of why we're doing things in a kind of performance mode. And I found it really charming to see people like fall in love on stage and go into like another realm where there's a sugar plum fairy and a marzipan castle. It's like, yeah, cool, great. And seeing an audience who was just like ready for it, and they want that, they kind of want this kind of transcendent experience. So I forgot that it existed, and I fell in love with it again. Not that I ever sort of fell out of love with it, but it was just really lovely to re-experience that and to see what it meant for people. So I have this story, I found this beautiful work, and it is this kind of very charming tale of these people who fall in love, and yeah, I was just very inspired by it. So I wanted to put this work into a public space. So we're talking a lot about line in the arcade this year, and the pink line, and I feel like there's often a line that people have to cross when they want to go and see dance in New Zealand. Like they cross the threshold of the theatre or the black box, or they go into a zone where they're going to see it. So I was really interested in putting dance into a space where people need to pay to see it, enforcing it upon them. So that was a really big element in why I kind of, I think, latched onto this idea and decided to present it, and where it was going to be presented, and like what the choreography is as such. Because I think people often don't think that choreography in a contemporary context can be really beautiful and be very pretty. Like we have kind of different forms that people have been interested in for the last couple of years. It's been very deconstructed, and yeah, it's kind of strangely the most classical work I've ever made. But yeah, that's why that work and why now.
Yeah, for me, to be honest, it really was the waterfront really drew me in, because as a woman from Oceania, obviously we are from the ocean, so that really drew me in. And as an emerging artist, I felt that this was a really great opportunity to present my work to a wider audience, as I've only presented in Auckland, so I thought that this would be a really great opportunity. And just to tell my story, you know, I feel that as Pacific people we have a lot of stories to tell, and I really just wanted to share my perspective on myself as a Samoan woman. So, nice and easy.
Yeah, and I think why the Performance Arcade? Well, obviously because you're the one that organised the fountain and made it happen. But why this work? I guess Lucy just touched on it. There's something magical about ballet as an art form, which you may not get in other forms of dance so much. But it's okay to be a fairy, it's okay to be a swan, and people walking past and seeing something on the water could capture that magic. And it's all ages, you know. It's not necessarily highbrow, and it's not necessarily me. I'm not seeing it as really my work. Like my part in this work is really the nuts and bolts of organising projectors, getting permissions, getting dancers, booking studios, actually filming the thing. But the actual work itself is the dancers, and it's the fountain. So I'm sort of like, most of my work is actually in a supporting role to other people, and I feel comfortable with this because it's the same way, so it works well for me.
And your work has a sort of a doubles, I mean, you're always working with a moving image, and therefore the screen to a certain extent, because it's on the surface of the harbour, there's often reflection, and so there's that sense of the screen or another space below.
Well, hopefully we'll get some really crystal clear days or nights where it is actually like that. This time of year it's hard, but tonight would be quite nice, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has a very different character. We did some testing Friday. It's a different character every night. It was in the wind. It became quite ghostly and kind of sort of like an apparition. Because from angles, the water kind of scattered and the image scattered, so it had on a still night it'd be a lot more sort of delicate. So yeah.
Isn't even just that raining down of the water is something therapeutic? I don't know. Like when you see a rainbow in a wave, the feathering of a wavelet, and you see the rainbows.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you get that feeling.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very, in that sense is a very sort of engaging with the sea and the ocean. Again, it's very much about us and how we live here. Obviously, it's a very European kind of image of a swan lake dancer, but it's on the water in the Wellington weather, so there's sort of an exposure of the work to.
But it's interesting that, like, as you found out, the fountain had been used for this one time previously in 1984 for what you said was the Sun Festival. And that would have been interesting because the projectors wouldn't have been anywhere near as powerful. Whereas at the moment we've got the two most powerful projectors in New Zealand, and we've managed to get them, and we're going to aim them both at the fountain and just blast it with like 31k digital projectors, two of them just going at it. So it should be quite interesting to see. If it's going to work, it's going to work with this. If it's not going to work, it won't work.
Oh, it works. We saw it on Friday. It looked magic. And somebody's already posted a video of it working, which is really nice. And each of the pieces really, I think, focus on the sort of body in these different landscapes. You know, whether it's the sort of architecture of the railway station, or the landscape of the waterfront, or the seascape. In sort of, and I think that sort of simple intervention of the moving body in those spaces is going to be really interesting in each of them. And I'm also interested in if you've each perceived any kind of other connections with the thematic of the line. Obviously I just sort of touched on one, Jeremy, in terms of the reflection of the water and the sort of space through the surface. Are there other kind of connections that you've seen in relationship to what the sort of arcade is, the sort of overall narrative is dealing with this year, and what your work is dealing with individually?
In terms of the line, I would say the lineage going back from looking at my ancestors, because I feel when I need to when I create a work, I always need to look back in order to move forward. So I would say that's my relation to the line, and for Ave having 6 Samoan women, there's lots of stories to tell, so it's for me as my role is to curate and interweave those stories to bring it together. So we do draw expression on the line going back.
That's something maybe easy to overlook with this sort of very geographic quality of the line itself, that it's going through space and along the waterfront, but there is these other notions of the line as something which goes forward and back in time and connects moments now with moments in the past, both sort of personal or political and such.
Cool. I think, because I've been thinking about this, because it's, I don't know, like line is something that just like runs through dance, really. And I don't know, like defining dance and defining what choreography is like my worst nightmare. But because essentially it goes down to like occupying time and space, and it's about lines and curves occupying time and space. And like we're all doing that right now. It's up to anyone whether they want to call this a dance. But I mean like Adam's dance, and we're Adams. So I don't know. I'm quite broad on those kind of concepts of what dance are and what choreography are, because to me one of the most beautiful choreographies I've ever seen are like Shibuya Crossing in Tokyo, and people walking through amongst one another. Like every time I see that, I'm like, it's beautiful to me, and like that's choreography, and I don't know, and it is. It's line and curves occupying time and space. So,
That's what I'm really mindful of in your work, is that you're occupying a very busy space where people are rushing from A to B, and you'll be creating this kind of, by comparison of their straight lines, a kind of doodle in that space that interrupts their own lines and makes them kind of divert and thereby kind of redress their directions.
Yeah, and that's where momentum comes into play. Like I feel like the dancers will be able to use that sense of momentum and kind of presence to be able to direct space a little bit. But as someone who's done a bit of performance work in public spaces, it's really very interesting to see how people react. Some people just stop and they'll share time and space with you, and that's beautiful, and we love those people. But I also have a special place in my heart. People who really have somewhere to go and they don't care what your choreography is, and they're going to go from A to B in the shortest way possible. And I love them for it. It's like, great, that's totally part of the choreography, and it's like things that are meant to be. It's like, great, that is a choice that they're making, and we will cope and deal with that choice. Some people also get aggressive that you're dancing in a public space, and we deal with that as well. But yeah.
I think that's why any of these works in public space, no matter how sort of romantic or whimsical they are, has a sort of political kind of quality, because you interrupt the public space with your work, and to interrupt the routine and make people look again is already kind of transforming the way people see public space.
And it asks questions about like how and why and who occupies space, and is it actually democratic? Because do we have just as right to be there prancing around as they do to get from A to B to get to their job or whatever because they've got an appointment? Or so I find putting dance into spaces like this like incredibly interesting and very revealing about us and the people who view it and their reactions to it.
I love reactions.
And I think it's the same about projecting onto the fountain. It's the same thing. It transforms a familiar routine, and suddenly people look differently at the space around them, even within a sort of a very classical image of a dancer on a lake. Suddenly something's very different.
But I mean, the thing though, when I first started filming ballet, like I come from a contemporary dance filming background through Footnote and School of Dance, but when I started having to get ballet videos signed off, it was very much about the position and the line, and there was a right and wrong, and you know, it's pretty black and white in a lot of ways when it comes to the line, you know, So I guess retrospectively I can think about it in that terms, and I can think about it in terms of the early ballet compared to the modern ballet and the line that's happened, whether the first Swan Lake influenced the first Dying Swan, and then the Dying Swan started to influence how the Swan Lake characters were portrayed, and they've come all the way through the line to now.
And Tia, have you encountered similar kind of lines between, say, Siva Samoa, hip-hop and contemporary dance in the way that Jeremy's describing the kind of lines of ballet and filming contemporary dance?
Yeah, I think interweaving the three was quite interesting because I feel that it's creating a style in itself. Because I initially came from a hip-hop background, I really loved hip-hop, but I went through such a rough patch in my life that it made me turn back to my culture. So, as I mentioned before, I am a New Zealand-born Samoan woman, so I didn't know much about my culture at all. I wasn't, brought up in the traditional side of being a Samoan. I'll just talk about that. Significant part of my life was when my mum passed away. So I felt that I needed to go back to my culture just to, find that sense of belonging that was missing after she had left. So I went and had lots of talanoa, which is conversation with my family and with other Pacific artists. And so learning, it's like relearning what is actually embedded in you, which was really, really interesting, quite challenging. And so having that love of hip-hop and learning Siva Samoa and then having that contemporary background from University of Auckland I didn't want to have that separate. I wanted to bring it together. So yeah, interweaving those three it's really great. It's just, I guess, trying to make it a style in itself rather than just three separate dance genres. Yeah.
How do the tattoo symbols relate to your work?
The tatau. For that other work, we just kept looking at the malu. So the malu is a tatau for women, and so we just kept researching into that, and so that related to the oceanic deity that we were researching, and so we felt that it was, I don't know about necessary, but it just felt like it was perfect to use tatau in the title, because we drew inspiration and we created movement, but we didn't want to we didn't have tatau on ourselves, so it was like, okay, how can we bring that into the movement? So we just put it in the title, and then formations that we use relate back to the tatau.
I don't want to derail the conversation, but can I also ask another question? So you had a deity from Māori, Samoan and Tongan culture.
Yeah.
Were they like representative of like equivocal things, or like were they different? Like were they representative? Were the deities representative of different things in each culture, or was there a similarity? Like,
so the reason why I chose to do that was because the first work, Ave, obviously related to myself as being Samoan, so I just got other Samoan women. But with the second piece, I realized that I had different cultures in the dances, and I felt that I guess I just didn't want to project me being Samoan to them when two of them can't relate.
Yeah.
So I thought that it would be better if we look back in their own cultures, and so Talanoa is a really great method for myself, conversation, and so we really conversed a lot. And I was like, okay, we would just talk like, how do you feel, like, and they'll just say, oh, I'm at a rough patch, whatever. And so I'm like, okay, cool, let's look back, let's find let's find characteristics you see yourself in our ancestors, or strong women. And so I got them to research, and so they actually found the deity themselves.
Right,
and so we did lots of writing. Written text is a big method in my process, and so we wrote lots of spoken word, and I think having that, the process, so seeing them in the beginning, they weren't really confident with themselves, and then at the end, like, it's crazy, I could just see them like light up. And so when you see the work, they are just like really, really strong. And so I thought that was great to see that the deities, because even though the three different cultures, they still connect with each other.
Yeah, like in what way? Like, is it? I think I'm sorry, phrase my question really badly. I was curious what the deities like represented in each culture. Do you know what I mean? Like what they kind of were symbolic of,
right,
and whether those things were similar. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the Samoan Nawhanua is the god of war, and so Faith, who is the Samoan dancer, she looked at Nawhanua because she has gone through lots of stuff, but she wanted to like find that power, right? So initially, all cultures in Pacific were all connected to each other because we're all from Oceania, right? Yeah. And so, sorry if I'm like rambling on.
I'm sorry, I derailed this, but it's fascinating.
Yeah.
You've got the mic, go for it.
Wait, can you repeat that, because I'm just rambling on.
The Samoan deity was the god of war?
Yeah.
God of war?
Yeah.
And
the Tongan one is Hikuleo, and sorry, I've just gone.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Do you remember the melody?
Hinenui Te Po. Sorry.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, let me just think.
Later.
Goddess of Death from the underworld. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's in a lot of myths, but I don't know Hikuleo.
Mm.
She's a Tongan deity.
Mm.
Sorry.
I'm also really interested in the audience's relationship to these stories and how you anticipate or encounter the audience in these stories you're telling as well. You know, in the arcade, there's a sort of line between everyday life and art that blurs when you put it there. That there are times people know they're seeing a piece of art, other times they're not sure. There's that sort of threshold, like, what's happening there? Is it just someone being strange? And then they realise it's actually a piece of art or a piece of dance or something sort of spectacular. So I'm really interested in what this dynamic brings to your work, like what excites you about this exposure of your work to public space and how it might change your work to the very stories that you've described, and brief encounters in this one, and the connections and the sort of intersections between those stories and this very large audience that uses the waterfront, which is as many as sort of 10,000 people a day or 30,000 people a day on a sunny day.
Yeah, I mean, my work doesn't tell a narrative in the way that the film does. Really, people will see a couple dancing together. That's kind of it. And then in terms of the way that reacts with the audience, I've been thinking about this as well, because it's really a story about a couple. It's about two people and, oh my God, without wanting to sound like a Spice Girls song, the idea of like two people becoming one. Okay, sorry. And I was kind of interested, the film did something really beautiful with all of the way the compositions were shot, and it kind of creates this really beautiful sense of like interiority. So the two actors, they're never seen kind of like in wide public spaces. It's very small, it's very private, and this I found really interesting about doing something quite intimate in a very public space. And so the duet kind of looks at that, but how do you create a sense of intimacy between the dancers so that the choreography reflects that, even though I'm putting it in a decidedly public space? So I think I've managed to do it. You sort of watch the dancers and they kind of look like a tumbleweed for about 12 non-stop minutes. But yeah, there is this beautiful sense of an internal world that they create together. And I think there's something quite satisfying around this. And it is in a public space, and people don't need to be worried they're not going to get hit in the face or flung around. Like, they are aware of their surroundings, but they're choosing to only focus on each other. So, yeah.
And is it them improvising?
No.
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 So you've created a 12-minute long choreography?
Yes, I did, in 6 days. I'm really looking forward to a time where I don't have to be like the fastest choreographer in the West. But yes, no, I'm just with projects and their commitments. We managed to find a 6-day window to smash out 12 minutes of choreography. Yeah, which is all set, but yeah. Hannah and Manu and Geniuses. So the two artists I'm talking about are Emmanuel Renaud, who was a dancer with me in Footnote. We've worked together for a very, very long time. He's one of my kind of key collaborators with Borderline Arts Ensemble, the company I run. And then Hannah Tasker-Poland, who is another really fantastic performance artist, and she goes between various kind of fields of performance. So she does a lot of contemporary dance, theatre, burlesque. Like, she is kind of just like chuck a genre at her and she'll, rise to the top. She's just a really stunning, very strong female performer. And interestingly, they're actually a couple in real life. So, yeah.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah.
And what about you guys in terms of the audience's encounter with your work? Because usually
I think it's a lot more simplistic for me, because the work is just placed there and it's not so much as interaction. But judging by what Twitter's already done, I'm interested to see the reactions on social media, as well as whether it draws more people down to the waterfront because of that.
people take ownership of it because they film it and because it's in their space.
It's encapsulated. Like, it's moving, but it's not going anywhere. So it's really easy to own it. Yeah. And it's a thing. Like, people may swim out to it. They might take their paddleboards and move around it. That could be quite interesting. That could be quite interactive.
Yeah.
You could jump in it. Yeah.
Firstly, I remember. Oh my goodness, not the nerves. So the Tongan Honikuleo is the goddess of Pulotu, which is the underworld. So, anyways, yeah, no, I'm really excited because when we performed Ave, it's in the theatre space, so engaging with the audience will be really interesting, especially because we have spoken word, and it's we don't want to scare them, but it's really like out there, so it'll be really interesting to see how they take it.
So you got two underworlds and the god of war.
Yes.
Okay, so it really does define.
Oh, that's the work for in the gallery, but for Ave, that's I'm excited to see people's reactions. So it's going to be really interesting. Engaging with audience,
It's right in the corner of the waterfront where we funnel spire on their way from Oriental Bay to the sort of CBD. And we have this container which has a sort of apron in the front of it where Tia's dancers will be dancing. And it's, you get a lot of traffic through there. People stop and spend time with you.
So it'll be really cool. And because we have live drumming as well in it, so it'll be really cool. And I've jumped in, so one of my dancers pulled out, so I'm like, okay, yay, cool. So it's going to be really good.
A dancing line is a misbehaving line. It's a kind of a line that jumps and moves and has energy. And dance is a kind of excessive movement and expression of vitality and freedom. So your works make the familiar grids and the straight lines and patterns jump and shake in the city. I think we've kind of discussed how that happens in various ways. So I'm really interested in what systems or restraints you've encountered in your work. What lines or systems are you trying to shake up and teach to dance a little bit?
Like I mentioned before, with the 3 dance styles, and also interweaving. Oh, sorry, no, I got it. The challenge for me is really honing myself as being Samoan, because I felt when I first started creating, I felt that I didn't really have the right to talk from a Samoan perspective, because that's just like me personally. I felt that because I wasn't born in Samoa and I didn't know much about it. So that was a challenge in itself, because I felt like I didn't have the right to, but now I'm like taking ownership, and so that's something that I'm hope that
Have you had any resistance to the way you work between those forms, or has it been very kind of received with kind of interest in the sort of systems that you've found?
I think definitely with Siva Samoa. When I first learned it, I thought there was a specific way of going about it, but a friend of mine, Tupe Lulua, she gave me really great advice. She said that Siva Samoa is different with each village, and so the way I do it goes back to the people before me, my mum, my grandmother, etc. So there's no right or wrong with it, and so I thought that was really great advice. And so now when I use Siva Samoa, I do it confidently, whereas before I felt that I needed to keep learning from other women, because I felt that there was only one specific way, where there's different ways of doing it.
Have you guys found any?
I'm a bit stressed out by the question. Can you just say the last part of it one more time? Or just like choose a tiny part of it and I'll just try and respond to a small part of it.
I'm just interested in any kind of things that, sort of systems or restraints that you've encountered in the work, or things that you're trying to shake up or teach to dance.
Gosh, I'm definitely not trying to teach dance anything. Not at all.
You're teaching a train station to dance.
It knows already. It's got its pathways already. No, it's all good. Finding new pathways in space with Hannah, Manu, and myself. Like that as a collaboration in trying to find the work, I suppose that was like the challenge. So I don't go into a process and like teach steps. I've got absolutely no interest in doing that. And so therefore the work's made in collaboration. And so that's always kind of a challenge. And with Hannah and Manu, quite interestingly, they're actually very similarly shaped dancers. They're about the same height. Their limb length is kind of the same, and so normally traditional partnering kind of, uses like masculine strength and a smaller female to like hoist the other person up. So you get a particular type of partnering aesthetic and form of lifts that come out of that. And so again, I could have worked with kind of contemporary lifts or classical contemporary lifts and used the same kind of setup for very spectacular lifts that are really aerobic and dynamic, because it's really easy to like hit a small dancer in the air. And so working with partners who have who have physical likeness, that was really fascinating to try and find ways, find new pathways that those bodies can support and partner one another in a way that kind of shows equality, as opposed to like man lift woman, which we've used for quite a while. So, did that sort of answer it? Weirdly, I sort of skipped the question a bit, but yeah. Kind of.
I'm also, Jeremy asked whether there was improvisation involved, and you said there wasn't. So I'm really interested without any improvisation, how does your dance work in that space to avoid the sort of collision of other people's pathways? What kind of sort of provision have you made for that in the dance, and how is that kind of...
So the work itself isn't exactly static. There's really nothing that stays on the spot. So things have like a direction, but they know that if needs be to veer off course. And so the choreography has been really generous in terms of that, and allowing them the ability to manipulate space and move around people as needs be. And then they're highly intelligent, very trained dancers and performers and improvisers that, there is an element of improvisation of like, okay, cool, we're going to face the other direction for the rest of the dance because that's just what's happened. So, I don't know.
Follow-up question to that. In a train station space, you have wide variability of like volume of people passing through it. How do you think the work will respond to different kind of volumes or speeds and intensities of people? Because it's been performed at different times.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you think it will change depending on the kind of the intensity of the environment? Or will it change?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. I'm not entirely sure. The work is kind of set, like there's a structure to the choreography. There are, dare I use the word steps, there are dance steps, like they have choreography that they do and they will complete and fulfill in various ways. Like they will find new things within the choreography because things will always change a little bit. New people with new pathways and I think they just have to be really adaptable to it. But the structure of the choreography will stay the same, like nothing will really radically change in terms of that. But it's set to a piece of music. So the other thing that's really classic about the original film Brief Encounter is the really incredible Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2, which is this like huge, big, like sweeping score. It's really beautiful, and I've chosen the second movement within this, which is the Adagio. So like the long, slow, kind of luscious piece of movement. But even within that, there are peaks and like falls within it, and so it's already got its own intensity and it already has its own kind of quietness. So I think anything else that happens will just add to it in an interesting way. Yeah, but we'll see, TBC.
This is the point where I'm really keen to hear other people have questions or responses to what we've discussed and what these artists have discussed in relation to their works. If you've got any sort of burning kind of query about it, or even observation about them, or if you guys have more questions for each other.
I have a question actually for you, Tia.
So you're taking, so your piece that you're having in the portrait gallery, how do you think that will kind of work? Because you're taking it out of kind of one traditional space and putting it into a very other, that kind of traditional space, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what your thoughts about that are, like taking it from the dance space and putting it into the traditional visual arts space, and how you think, you know, people might react to it in that way.
I think because I have video with the piece, I think it will fit in that space. Again, it is different because it's not in a theatre space, but I think it'll be really interesting to see the video on the walls complementing the dance itself. So I think it might be maybe better in that space, but I've never seen it, so I'm really excited to see how it goes. In terms of the audience reacting to it, I think, I'm not sure how, I mean, yeah, I hope they like it, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And there's also a dialogue between the dance that Tia's doing in that space and the exhibition, which is an exhibition of photography by a Samoan photographer, portraits. So there's still that sort of character or portraiture and identity and sort of persona.
I think there'll be a nice connection as well
Yeah.
with that work. Yeah, this. Yeah.
I have another question for Tia.
Oh, yes.
You're wearing pink. I am interested in your sort of weaving of the three forms of movement, and I'm curious to know if it's the three forms that they're being woven together so that it is being physically manifested in, like, it's a new thing, right? Is that what you mean? Like all three styles are informing what you're doing physically, or is it also conceptually?
I think it's both. Again, using a traditional concept, but we are adding that contemporary element to it. In terms of the genres, it's still a work in progress. Ideally, I would love it to be a whole, complete new, dance genre in itself, but that takes, a really long time to do. So I'm aiming for that. And so at the moment, it's just like a work in progress. But again, for me, it's being surrounded by diverse, different artists, being with Pacific artists and contemporary artists.
But that makes it contemporary, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like it's something new. Like it's not like the fact that you're, merging these things together is contemporary on its own.
Ooh. yeah. Oh, okay.
Cool. Contemporary dance doesn't have a specific style.
Yeah.
It's like anything.
That's something I'm learning too, because I felt transitioning from hip hop to contemporary, I thought it was the specific way of moving, but I realized that it's just like there's multiple. There's no rules, and that's what I love about it. Because hip hop, there are rules, so it's adding that together. I feel like there's specific ways of hip hop. There's really hard hitting moves with soft there's foundations. I feel like there's just a specific way of hip hop.
Because I prior to this, I watched your work at Hip Hop World Championships, and I found that really fascinating because it was so diverse in the genres that were in there. Yes, you'd call it hip hop, but actually it was pop flossy. There were these other kind of elements of movement within it, and I just found that really fascinating. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are rules, or is it just a style?
Styles is what I mean.
Things,
there's crump. There's I feel like there's specific styles within. That's what I mean. Whereas contemporary, it's very open. Yeah.
But I mean, there kind of still are styles within contemporary. In New Zealand, we probably have a very kind of Eric Hawkins based technique for our contemporary, which came over through Michael Parmenter. There's also elements of Buto through, again, Michael Parmenter doing studies with Min Tanaka in Japan, and Douglas Wright working with Paul Taylor. Like, so New Zealand's quite interesting in its contemporary dance because people always go and then they come back and they share.
Yeah.
So we've got a really kind of strange but rather incredible and virtuosic contemporary dance language. But in terms of contemporary dance as a form itself, like the overarching form, like there's not a set of steps that we do. So yeah, are you saying that hip hop kind of the same? There's not like a set of steps, but it's like kind of like in terms of like the kind of physical. Because I mean, like when I'm watching hip hop, I know what I'm watching. Do you know what I mean? When I'm watching ballet, I know what I'm watching. I mean, there's some things that you're like curious.
Yeah.
Don't know what part of the Venn diagram that falls into.
I think that's the difference. Yeah. So for me, being able to use the three, I think it's really interesting. Yeah. And like you said, when I go into a space, it's collaborative with my dancers, and it's always different every time. And that's what I love about it, because you know, we talanoa over food, and like it's just like so many methods, you know. And so go back to Anita. Yeah. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I'm just really curious to see it. It sounds awesome. Yeah, I love the merging of all the things.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
Anybody got any other questions? These artists?
I think for me, music was interesting, so I wasn't too sure if you were going to have music or not. That's kind of what the last now through speakers.
I hope so. In a way that people can still hear their trains being announced. TBC. Yeah.
So Jeremy, are we going to have music?
I don't think so. Unless we can organise it.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
And okay, this is just like really basic. Is this at night time, Jeremy, or was this during the day as well?
Oh,
It pretty much has to be at night time.
Yeah.
Just because.
Yeah.
I mean, these projectors are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So we were sort of seeing it at dusk the other night, and that was with the one 32K projector. By the time we had two 32K projectors, you'll probably see it in daylight, sort of. Which I thought that would be an interesting idea, but it might be just more effective at night.
If it was a white screen, it'd be all right. But because it's water, we lose a lot through it.
Yeah.
So actually, even with two projectors, we have to sort of start it after sunset. We found it's amazing how much you lose. I mean, when the Sun Festival projected onto the Carter Fountain, they had a raft floating next to the fountain, and they projected straight up to it. It was really close, and even then it was quite faint. Whereas we're shining over like 190 meters so we lose a lot from that. And then if the weather's bad, so there's a lot of factors that affect it. But you know, the strength of these projectors still break through most of that. And so just about 20 minutes after sunset, it'll go on, and that's when it looks really great, because we don't want it to be too kind of
wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Watery.
The visual will be really interesting without sound as well. But it's the sound of everything.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably put some kind of speaker there that it might lose a bit of the magic in a way.
Just so, we're looking at dance.
Yeah. Can you hear the fountain from there again?
On the depending on the weather, it's either you hear the wind or the fountain.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sort of elemental kind of stuff around it, like you're seeing just behind the dance the lights of the city, and the water kind of looks like it's boiling when it flies over those lights. So there's all these kind of other things which start to dance with the image, and so it animates a lot around it through virtue of its own kind of spectacle.
Which it will do in all pieces of animation. Tia, how will your legs just be literally in one place, or can they move around, or don't know yet?
Not sure.
Yes,
in our gallery, people wander and
Yeah.
look at different angles. So is that the intent, or are we going to have seats?
The arcade doesn't really provide many seats, because that then starts to kind of defer to very known ways of watching, and we let audiences work it out for themselves. And most of the time people do what you'd expect, and they stand where the performers are facing. So, which is fine. And then, but people are also welcome to stand off to the side and have their own viewpoint of the work. And I think that's what's quite important, is there's that kind of openness to be a conventional audience member and just play your part in that way, or to actually kind of watch it in a very different way.
The piece, both pieces are quite 360, so we can really just shift and adapt anywhere. Yeah.
And the sound of that is the drumming as
Yeah,
well.
so with Ave, it's we have traditional music, and then we have contemporary music, and then we have spoken word, and we have live drumming. So it's a really big work, but it's really nice.
And that's quite, that drumming really pulls you in when it's on, so you kind of be magnetised to the performance too.
And that just complements us, being from both sides, New Zealand, Samoan. So yeah, we wanted to put the two together.
Are there any other questions? Because I'm almost out of time. We've got space for at least one more.
I actually think I'm most looking forward to, with Lucy's work, watching the people.
Yeah.
So it's like what Tom was talking about, the surges of people, and there won't be. And I think the way, that New Zealand audiences are very polite, right? And so they'll probably give it space.
Yeah.
But that, from afar, will be really nice to see the people.
Yeah. Become part of the choreography.
Become
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
set, essentially,
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to this, which is why I'm not dancing at it, so I can sit out and watch it. Yeah. No, I'm excited about this as well. Yeah. The only other thing that was kind of possible, which no one's spoken about, is the odd strange person who wants to go and participate. And mine is really very clearly not a participatory work. So if someone decides to have this sort of impromptu menage a trois with Hannah, that's the only other eventuality that we didn't really talk about. But I don't think it'll happen. But who knows?
It'll take some great bravery to break into what looks like a very rehearsed piece
Yes.
with your own unrehearsed action.
But also, it is in a public space, so it kind of sort of all bets are off. People can kind of behave in any sort of way. But I doubt it. But.
Yeah.
But it'll change as to where you put it. If you put it in a railway station, it'll be completely different to the middle of the quay, which will be completely different to Cuba Street.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a place of transit, right? So there is going to be a sense of crossing, and depending on where we do it, where precisely we place it, this is going to have an impact on it. But I think that's kind of part of the joy for us as the three people who contributed to creating it, and finding out what other people's contributions create and contribute to the work as well. Because it will.
I'm really interested in seeing how people misbehave around it.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's something which I think is in each of these works we've talked today is this sort of element of misbehaviour. It's very obvious in the railway station where everybody's kind of, on a track, but and that kind of potential for people to join in. But the fact what you're doing is so expressive in there is the misbehaviour.
Yeah.
And then there's the misbehaviour of sort of crossing disciplinary boundaries. And cultural boundaries of the work, which I think is really interesting. People recognise and really pick up on. And then also the misbehaviour of kind of doing something with this very familiar piece of architecture, the fountain, which hasn't had anything done to it for 35 years. And even, got Twitter responses from a News Talk ZB kind of journalist because it wasn't doing what it's meant to be doing just today. And so even though it's one of the most well-behaved of dance forms, ballet, it's still a misbehaviour, it's still misusing this space and doing something interesting. And I think that's what I find really exciting about bringing such diverse kind of dance works to the performance arcade, is it really kind of makes things move in a different way, makes people see the spaces in a different way. And I'm really looking forward to each of them kind of doing that and misbehaving on Wellington Waterfront and ways along the Pink Line. So thank you so much for such amazing kind of insights into your works. On cue. Thanks. I have sort of 3 little jobs to do at the end before I wrap up. First of all is to thank the speakers again for the 3rd time for being here and bringing your work as a little preview for everybody online, so we can watch it again if we like to. And thank Circa for their hospitality. Please stay in the bar afterwards to continue the conversations. The second thing I'd like to do is invite you all to our 2nd live article at Wellington Museum, where Paula van Beek will chair a discussion, Sightlines, with the artists Lisa Munnelly, Madeline Trigg and Charlotte Shade. And that's very much about the body, the female body and the gaze. And that'll be on Tuesday evening next week at Wellington Museum. And finally, you may have seen this beautiful pink wristband that I'm wearing. If you'd like to show your support for the Performance Arcade this year and to be eligible for discounts at various kind of arcade experiences, then you can buy one of these from our staff tonight. Do you have some, Rachel? For $20. And then you can wear them to our event and you'll get discounts at the bar, your discounts at the food stalls. There's some ticketed events that are culinary performances, which you get discounts at. And there's also the arcade shop. And there'll be some special competitions for people with these wristbands as well. So it's a nice way of showing your support for a free event, and you can wear it with pride and be part of our Pink Line project for the next month. So and just talk to Rachel about that if you'd like one, and they'll be available at our other events as well. And so, once again, thank you so much, guys, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks.